Welcome to Science Listener. Tonight your eyes drift not across galaxies but into something stranger. The invisible current we call time. It feels so obvious. The seconds tick, the hours pass, yesterday is gone, and tomorrow waits. Yet hidden behind that simple rhythm lies a mystery greater than stars or galaxies, because no one is certain what time really is. To the mind it seems natural, but to physics it is slippery. Some theories say time flows like a river, carrying us from past to future. Others argue the river does not flow at all. All moments exist at once. And what you feel as now is only the illusion of your mind. For centuries, philosophers asked, is time real, or only the way humans measure change? So before you settle in, don't forget to press like and subscribe, but only if you're curious how reality itself might be an illusion. And leave me a comment. Where are you listening from, and what time is it? Strange to think of someone lying in bed in Tokyo as midnight drifts past, while someone else in Los Angeles is just watching the afternoon sunset. Different clocks, the same mystery. For generations we measured time with shadows, with gears, with digital numbers glowing in the dark. Yet modern science tells us it may not be ticking forward at all. Maybe the past and the future are already here, waiting. Maybe change, memory and decay are the only reasons you feel the seconds move. Close your eyes and imagine a world where every moment of your life already exists, stacked together like pages of a book. You're simply turning the page, but the story is already written. In that silence you realize the universe is stranger, richer, and more unsettling than it first appears. And this is where our story about time begins. The first truth you face is unsettling in its simplicity. Time may not exist in the way you think it does. Scientists, philosophers, and even physicists of the 20th century began to whisper that perhaps the thing you feel most intimately, the flow of seconds, the weight of years, is not part of reality at all. You live as if time were a river, flowing forward, carrying you from a childhood you can remember toward a future you can only imagine. Yet the more closely you examine that flow, the less substance it seems to have. In 1905, Albert Einstein proposed his special theory of relativity, and one of its most disturbing consequences was that time is not universal. A second for you is not the same as a second for someone racing near the speed of light. Time bends and stretches. It has no absolute tick. Imagine hearing a bell toll in a medieval town square in 1315, when famine swept across Europe. To the peasants scraping bark to eat, the toll marked another hour of hunger. To a modern physicist, the same hour could dilate or contract depending on motion and gravity. Hunger and bell are real. The hour itself is negotiable. Your mind, however, refuses to accept this uncertainty. Neuroscience has shown that your brain stitches the world together as a sequence, editing memories and predictions into a narrative you call the present. The sensation that now flows into later may be nothing more than the machinery of memory and anticipation. The philosopher Augustine, in the 5th century, already sensed the trap. He wrote that he understood what time was, until someone asked him to explain it. At that moment the idea dissolved in his hands like water. Consider how your own body measures time. You feel it in the ache of muscles after walking since dawn, in the fading taste of bread chewed too quickly, in the cold that seeps deeper with each hour of winter night. These sensations convince you of movement from past to present. Yet physics suggests that all these moments may exist simultaneously, layered like pages in a book. while your consciousness simply turns them one by one. The past is not gone, the future not absent. They're simply elsewhere in the block of space-time. Without time, you ask, how is experience possible? How can you hunger, age, or love without a flow? The unsettling answer offered by philosophers of the eternalist view is that experience does not require flow. All your moments already exist. The instant of your first breath, the instant of your final silence, and every heartbeat in between. You're not carried by a current. You're the pages already written, and your awareness is the eye that moves across the lines. So you close your eyes and sit with the thought, perhaps what you call time is nothing more than your body's way of marking change, your memory's way of stitching stories. And if that is true, then the seconds you trust so much may be no firmer than shadows across stone. There is, however, one stubborn clue that refuses to let time dissolve completely. It always seems to move in one direction. No matter how much science bends or reshapes it, you feel the arrow pressing forward. You remember the past but not the future. You grow older but never younger, and broken glass never leaps whole again from the floor. In the 17th century, Isaac Newton described time as absolute, flowing steadily like a perfect river no matter what happened in the world. But by the 19th century, scientists studying heat and energy began to see cracks in that vision. In 1824, Sadi Carnot published his reflections on heat engines, and in doing so opened the door to the idea that energy is never perfectly conserved in usable form. By 1850, Rudolf Clausius coined the word entropy to describe the measure of disorder in a system, and he declared the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy always increases. That, more than any clock, became the arrow of time. You can taste this law in something as simple as bread left on the table. Fresh from the oven, its crust still warm, it smells of flour and fire. Leave it for days and the bread goes stale, the smell fades, the surface hardens. Entropy has increased. The order of softness and steam has collapsed into dryness and air. You never see the reverse, stale bread turning fresh. In the winter of 1316, during the worst years of the Great Famine in Europe, people noticed the arrow of time not in abstract equations but in the way rotting grain and spoiled meat never returned to health. Time was hunger, and entropy was death. Physics explains it with cold precision. Microscopic laws are reversible, yet the macroscopic world is not. The molecules of gas in a chamber follow equations that could run forward or backward equally. But in practice, gas released from a bottle spreads into the room. It never squeezes itself back in. A shattered jug in a medieval kitchen scatters shards across the floor, and though nothing in Newton's equations forbids those shards from flying back together, you will never see it. You might think this is simply common sense, but common sense is what physics always tests. In the 1870s, Ludwig Boltzmann argued that entropy's growth is not a mystical law, but a matter of probability. There are vastly more disordered states than ordered ones. A deck of cards can be shuffled into billions of random arrangements, but only one or two count as perfectly ordered. The same with molecules, bread, and glass. You too are subject to this. The smooth skin of youth has fewer possible states, while age multiplies wrinkles, scars, illnesses, disorder unfolding naturally. And yet entropy does not explain everything about your experience of time. You remember the past, but not the future, and no one can fully explain why memory runs one way. Neuroscience ties it to biology. Neurons store and alter connections as you live, but they cannot encode what has not yet occurred. The arrow of memory may simply be a reflection of entropy in the brain. Energy flows in one direction, chemical bonds shift irreversibly. You feel that direction as nostalgia, as regret, as anticipation. Consider how you sense it in your own body. After a day of walking through frozen streets, you cannot unwind the ache in your legs by wishing. After eating, the taste fades and never returns whole. After a kiss, warmth lingers, but it does not reset you to the moment before lips touched. Each act leaves a residue. Each moment collapses into the next, and your awareness tells you there is no going back. That residue, that irreversibility, is the only reason you feel time moving forward. By the 20th century, cosmology raised the stakes. If entropy is the arrow of time, then the universe itself has an arrow. From the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago, when all matter was in an incredibly low entropy state, toward the expanding, cooling cosmos we see today. Stars burn fuel and collapse, galaxies drift apart, black holes grow, all irreversible, all obeying the second law. When astronomers look at distant galaxies like Andromeda, they see them as they were millions of years ago, light stretched and reddened by expansion. Every photon carries the mark of entropy. Every ray of light is a relic of an arrow pointing forward. And still, the paradox lingers. If the laws of physics allow reversal, why does it never happen? Why can't you remember tomorrow? Why do you live only in the half of the universe where entropy grows? Some argue that the Big Bang itself was special, a universe born in unnatural order and ever since collapsing into chaos. Others suspect there are regions of the cosmos where time runs differently, where arrows point in other directions. But for you, here, in your bed as you listen, the arrow is relentless. You lie in the dark and hear the faint hum of a clock or the tick of your own pulse. Each beat is irreversible, each breath exhaled into air that will never return unspent. Whether or not time exists as a fundamental thing, the arrow of entropy ensures that your life has direction, and in that direction, you move. Yet the moment you accept that direction, imagination rebels. If time is real enough to give you an arrow, what happens when you try to turn it back? The result is a tangle of paradoxes, puzzles so sharp that they cut through both science and storytelling, leaving you dizzy with contradictions. The most famous of them is the grandfather paradox. Imagine you travel to the year 1890, long before you were born. You meet your grandfather as a young man, perhaps in a crowded market that smells of coal smoke and horse dung, the sound of iron shoes striking cobblestones echoing in your ears. If you prevent him from meeting your grandmother, if you strike him down or simply push his life off its path, then your parents will never be born, and you will never exist. But if you never exist, who then travelled back to alter his life? In that loop, logic collapses. Writers have played with this trap for centuries. H.G. Wells, in his Time Machine of 1895, opened the popular imagination to the idea of temporal travel, though his hero never risked changing his own family tree. By the 20th century, science fiction was filled with assassins sent back to alter the future, from pulp magazines of the 1940s to blockbuster films of the 1980s. Each variation sharpened the same blade. The past resists contradiction. Then comes the bootstrap paradox, sometimes called the ontological paradox. Picture a worn notebook on your desk, filled with equations for a machine that does not yet exist. You build it, succeed, and years later hand the same notebook to your younger self. Where, then, did the knowledge originate? The equations never had an inventor. They are born from the loop itself. It is like a song with no composer, echoing through the centuries without a beginning. In 1989, philosopher David Lewis argued that such loops might be logically consistent. Yet they leave you uneasy because they erase the very idea of creation. The predestination paradox presses even harder. You try to travel into the past to prevent an event, a war, a plague, a death. But in trying to stop it, you create the very conditions that bring it about. A messenger sent to warn a city of fire causes panic that lights the blaze. A soldier who seeks to avert a battle stumbles into the first shot that begins it. Greek tragedies were filled with this theme. Oedipus flees the prophecy of killing his father, and in fleeing fulfills it. The past cannot be changed because your attempt to alter it is already part of the story. And then there is the strangest of all, Polchinski's paradox. In 1990, physicist Joseph Polchinski imagined a simple game with a billiard ball and a wormhole. The ball rolls into one mouth of the wormhole, emerges in the past and collides with its younger self in such a way that it prevents itself from ever entering. Logic stumbles. How can the ball both enter and not enter? The mathematics of general relativity allows wormholes, but this scenario ties them in knots. You sit with these paradoxes and feel your body tense. You can almost hear the hum of a wormhole, smell the ozone of twisted air, feel the vibration of impossible loops. They are not just riddles for philosophers, they are tests of reality. If time travel is ever possible, will the universe allow you to fracture its logic? Some physicists answer with the Novikov self-consistency principle. Proposed in the 1980s, events are constrained. Whatever you do in the past will always align with history, because paradoxical actions simply cannot occur. You may meet your grandfather, but circumstances will conspire to keep the line unbroken. Still you wonder, if all your moments exist already, if the block of space-time holds every page of your life, then paradoxes may not be contradictions at all. They are simply perspectives, different pages glimpsed out of order. The discomfort is yours, not the universe's. If all your moments exist already, if the block of space-time holds every page of your life, then paradoxes may not be contradictions at all. They are simply perspectives, different pages glimpsed out of order. The discomfort belongs to human logic, not to the structure of the universe, and yet the weight of daily life presses back against this vision, demanding an answer. Hunger arrives in the body, seasons carve their marks on the land, children grow taller and faces grow older. You sit by a fire and watch wood collapse into embers, the warmth fading from your skin, and in that simple act the illusion of flow feels impossible to deny. If time is not real, why does the body ache after hours of walking? Why does bread grow stale and memory slip further from your grasp each year? In the medieval winter of 1315, the Great Famine swept across Europe. Villagers counted the hours not with sundials, but with the sound of empty stomachs. Bark ground into bitter flour, acorns milled into a tasteless paste. This was the clock that measured survival. Hunger was a unit more precise than any pendulum, marking the passing of day and night with the rhythm of pain. To peasants watching their children waste away, it was impossible to imagine that time did not exist. And yet, centuries later, physicists would argue that what they felt was not time but change. Matter shifting state, energy dispersing, order dissolving into disorder. By 1665, Christian Huygens built one of the first accurate pendulum clocks. Its steady swing brought order to cities and merchants, to the ringing of bells and the opening of markets. For the first time, people could divide their day into identical hours, synchronized across towns. You picture yourself standing in that square, hearing the metallic clang each 60 seconds, feeling the tick like a heartbeat that does not belong to your body but forces itself into your nerves. Yet the pendulum did not create time, it only mirrored the turning of Earth, an illusion of control over something deeper, or perhaps over nothing at all. In 1953, neurologists studied patients who had lost the function of the hippocampus. These people lived without the ability to form new memories. One woman, handed a cup of tea, would sip it, place it down, and moments later ask who had poured it. To her, there was no yesterday, no 5 minutes ago. Every instant was isolated, disconnected, raw. Without memory, there was no past, only an endless present. You imagine living this way, reaching for bread and finding it always new, always unfamiliar, every bite an introduction. For such a person, the flow of time ceases to exist because the brain cannot weave change into a story. Neuroscience revealed what philosophers like Augustine had long suspected. Memory, not clocks, stitches experience into the thing you call time. Still, the body insists. Wrinkles crease your skin, hair loses its colour, joints protest as you climb stairs. These are not abstractions but cellular events. Proteins misfolding, DNA accumulating errors, cartilage thinning. Biology describes them without invoking time as a substance. They are transformations, each one irreversible, each one convincing you that years pass. In truth, they are matter-shifting state, entropy expressed in flesh. You feel them as time because your mind turns change into a narrative. Sleep, too, exposes the fragility of the illusion. In medieval houses, night was divided not by mechanical clocks, but by the dim glow of candles, the crow of roosters, the cycle of waking and dozing. Modern science shows that human sleep follows a pattern of roughly 90 minutes, with the brain moving through stages of deep rest and vivid dreams. Yet inside the dream, you do not measure minutes. You might live a whole story in the span of 10 real seconds, or blink and find that hours have gone. You close your eyes, drift, and open them again. The missing time is nowhere. The body has changed states, but no flowing river carried you. Philosopher Julian Barber, writing in the late 20th century, offered one of the most radical visions. He argued that reality may be nothing more than a vast collection of nows, complete configurations of the universe, timeless and absolute. In his view, your life is not a path but a gallery. Each moment, the hunger of 1315, the swing of Huygens' pendulum, the confusion of a patient in 1953, the warmth of fire on your face tonight, is a painting, frozen, eternal. You do not move through them. They exist together side by side, and consciousness flickers across them, giving the illusion of motion. It is a harsh vision, yet strangely calming. If the universe is a block of pages already written, then nothing is lost. The first cry of birth, the final silence of death, and every trembling instant between them are present forever. Flow is not required. What you call time may be nothing more than the mind's way of experiencing change in a structure already complete. Experience remains undeniable, but theories insist it needs no flowing current. Hunger, memory, aging, sleep, all transformations inscribed in a greater whole. The book does not turn its own pages, it lies complete, every line already written, every chapter already present. What appears as silence may be the shape of eternity. The silence breaks with another shock. Physics itself does not know which way time runs. The equations that govern the universe are blind to direction, as comfortable with reversal as with progress. The arrow that feels so natural in your body is nowhere to be found in the mathematics of nature. You lie awake at night and listen to the rhythm of water dripping into a basin. Each drop feels final. It falls, it strikes, it fades. Yet if you were to film it and play it in reverse, the droplet rising back to the ceiling would look absurd to your senses, but not impossible to the laws of motion. Newton's equations, written in the 17th century, are perfectly symmetrical. A falling apple and an apple returning upward are equally valid descriptions. The shock lies not in the math, but in your instinct. By 1872, Ludwig Boltzmann was grappling with this tension. He introduced his great equation for entropy, carved a later on his tombstone in Vienna, and with it admitted the paradox. The micro world is reversible, but the macro world is not. Molecules of gas in a container collide in ways that could just as well be rewound. But when the stopper is pulled and the scent of wine escapes into the tavern air, you never see it gather itself again into the bottle. The laws of physics allow it, but probability buries the chance so deep it becomes invisible. You picture yourself in a medieval kitchen. A jug slips from your hand, shatters on the floor, shards scatter, liquid spreads, dust rises. The image screams of finality. Yet the same equations that describe the shattering would also describe the impossible reversal. Shards leaping back together, liquid reforming. Physics alone does not choose between them. What chooses is the world you inhabit, the scale at which you live, the body that insists on forwardness. Einstein's relativity in 1905 and 1915 only unsettled this further. Time was no longer absolute, but braided into the geometry of space-time. Two observers could watch the same flash of lightning, one from a moving train, another from a platform, and disagree on its simultaneity. Both would be correct. If simultaneity itself is relative, then the idea of a universal now dissolves. Without a universal present, what gives time its direction? You breathe and feel your chest rise, your pulse strike in your wrist. The body assures you of a rhythm, yet equations assure you that the rhythm could run either way. Between the certainty of flesh and the indifference of mathematics lies the arrow of time, mysterious, stubborn, and still unexplained. Equations remain indifferent, flowing forward or backward with equal ease. The world of experience insists otherwise. Between the symmetry of physics and the irreversibility of life stretches the riddle of the arrow, an arrow no law of nature has yet written. The answer came not from celestial mathematics, but from the study of heat, work, and waste. In the 19th century, engineers searching to improve steam engines stumbled upon the only law that gives time its direction. They called it the second law of thermodynamics, and its measure was entropy. In 1824, Sadi Carnot studied steam engines and asked why they could never be perfectly efficient. His insight was simple and devastating. Heat always flows from hot to cold, never the other way. By 1850, Rudolf Clausius gave that inevitability a name: entropy. He declared that in any closed system, entropy increases. That increase became the arrow of time, more reliable than the swing of a pendulum. You taste entropy in bread gone stale. Fresh from the oven, it smells of crust and warmth. Leave it too long, and it grows dry, brittle, lifeless. You see it in a candle, the wax softening, the flame trembling, the stub shrinking. No flame ever regrows wax. In 1316, during the height of the Great Famine, spoiled grain filled granaries. Villagers hoped in vain that rot would reverse, but food never healed itself. Entropy ruled every stomach, every field. Boltzmann in the 1870s gave entropy its deepest meaning. He explained that disorder dominates simply because it is more probable. There are countless ways for bread to be stale, but only one way for it to be fresh. There are endless states of broken glass, but only one of wholeness. You picture yourself in a kitchen again. A jug shatters on the stones. The dust hangs in the air. The liquid seeps into cracks. Your eyes know the story is finished. What you call irreversibility is simply probability overwhelming possibility. Entropy enters your body as well. After a day's labour, muscles ache, skin grows rough, breath shortens. The order of youth unravels into the complexity of age. Cells divide imperfectly, proteins misfold, DNA accumulates damage. You feel this as the passing of years, but biology describes it as entropy increasing in flesh. The body does not travel through time, it transforms. By the early 20th century, cosmologists realized entropy was not just a law for kitchens and engines, but for the universe itself. The cosmos began in an extraordinarily low entropy state at the Big Bang, a rare flicker of order, and ever since it has moved toward disorder. Stars burn their fuel, galaxies drift, heat spreads thin. You look at the night sky, the faint light of Andromeda reaching you after 2.5 million years, and every photon is a record of entropy's advance. The arrow of time is not written in equations, but in the growing disorder of everything you see, hear, and feel. And yet there is another arrow, more intimate than entropy and more persuasive than mathematics: memory. You remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. You recall the taste of bread you ate, the words spoken to you, the pain of falling. But you cannot recall what will happen this evening, what you will eat, or whom you will meet. The asymmetry of memory is so complete that it defines your idea of time itself. In 1870, German physiologist Hermann Ebbinghaus began experiments on how memory fades. He tested himself with lists of nonsense syllables, charting the now famous forgetting curve. The mind loses detail with astonishing speed. By the 20th century, neurologists found that memory was not a storage box but a reconstruction. Each recollection is rebuilt anew, stitched from fragments of sensation, smell, and story. What you call the past is a fragile construction, recreated each time you summon it. You picture yourself at a table tearing bread. Its crust crunches, its warmth steams, the smell of yeast lingers. Later, recalling it, the memory is thinner, a ghost of warmth, a suggestion of smell. With years, it will fade further until nothing remains but the idea that bread was once eaten. This vanishing is the only proof you need that your sense of time leans backward. Neuroscience sharpened the asymmetry in the mid-20th century. In 1953, surgeons treating epilepsy removed parts of a patient's hippocampus. The man, known to history as HM, survived but could form no new memories. Each day he greeted doctors as strangers. Each hour he rediscovered the same facts. He could describe his childhood but not his breakfast. His life was a present without future. You imagine being him, reaching out for a cup, drinking, setting it down, and the moment vanishing instantly into oblivion. Without the ability to remember, time itself dissolves. The asymmetry grows sharper when you consider dreams. During REM sleep, the brain creates vivid narratives, but upon waking they collapse within minutes. You lie in bed and try to hold them, but they slip like smoke. The future feels the same. It exists only as possibility, never solid enough to grasp. The brain is built to encode the past, not the future. Evolution shaped it this way because survival depends on learning what has already hurt, not on predicting what might. By the late 20th century, psychologists proposed that memory and imagination are in fact twin processes, both using the same brain structures. To remember is to simulate the past. To imagine is to simulate the future. The difference is that one has evidence and the other does not. Memory has roots, though fragile. Imagination floats. Both create the sense of a moving present, but only one carries weight. The asymmetry explains why history feels solid, but destiny does not. Chronicles from 1315 record the famine, the bark ground into flour, the children starving. These memories, even if written by others, anchor the past. The year 1316 is known because it already happened. The year ahead cannot be anchored, no matter how many predictions are written. The body itself enforces this. Scars prove wounds already endured, hunger reminds of food already missed. No scar tells you the pain of tomorrow. Time's arrow is thus carved into the nervous system, not into the equations of physics. You feel it when smell recalls childhood, when taste brings back moments lost, when scars whisper of injuries. The future carries no such markers. Between entropy spreading through the cosmos and memory etched into flesh, time seems to move only one way. The paradox is clear. Physics does not demand direction, but life does. Memory insists on a past, imagination pretends at a future, and the body believes in the arrow with every scar, every scent, every fragment of taste. The universe may be timeless, yet in lived experience the asymmetry of memory becomes the shape of time. But memory is not the only candidate. Across centuries, scientists and philosophers have proposed other arrows, each claiming to explain why time seems to lean forward. Some are written in the expansion of galaxies, some in the silence of quantum particles, some in the fragile architecture of the human mind. The first of these is the psychological arrow. Anticipation is the one thing that turns the future into a palpable weight. You walk through a dim street at dusk and hear the sound of footsteps behind you. No harm has touched you yet. No hand rests on your shoulder, but your pulse speeds and your skin tightens. The body leans forward into what has not happened. The future is still a possibility, yet the nervous system has already given it presence. Psychology is not physics, but for most of human history it has been enough. Fear, hunger, expectation, all insist that time points ahead. Beyond the body lies the cosmos itself. In 1927, the Belgian priest and astronomer Georges Lemaitre proposed that the universe was expanding from a primordial atom, what we now call the Big Bang. For centuries before him, philosophers debated whether the cosmos was eternal or finite. Lemaitre shocked the scientific world by arguing for a universe with a beginning and a trajectory. That trajectory was confirmed in 1965 when Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson accidentally detected the cosmic microwave background. Faint static, the cooled echo of the first fire. You lift your head on a winter night, breath turning white in the air, and stare upward. The stars above do not sit still. Galaxies are sliding away, their light stretched into red shadows. Expansion itself acts as a clock, one whose tick is measured not by seconds but by distance. Each moment of cosmic growth another beat forward. The third arrow lies in the quantum world. In the 1930s, Einstein argued with Niels Bohr over the role of chance in the smallest particles. Was the universe built on certainty or on randomness? By the late 1950s, Hugh Everett proposed his many worlds interpretation, a radical vision in which every quantum event splits reality into parallel versions. A coin falls, and in one branch of existence it lands on heads, in another on tails. You see only one outcome, but physics does not deny the other. The arrow emerges because you cannot walk both paths at once. To live is to believe in a single thread, even if countless others stretch beyond your reach. Taken together, these arrows weave an uneasy tapestry. Psychology tilts you toward the future. Cosmology pulls you outward into a thinning universe. Quantum theory fractures your choices into unseen branches. None of them prove time's existence as a flowing substance, yet all of them convince you of direction. Each arrow is a partial answer, and their overlap creates the rhythm you feel. The expansion of galaxies will continue until stars dim, until space grows colder and emptier. Quantum worlds will continue to branch whether anyone watches or not. Minds will continue to expect, to wait, to tilt into tomorrows. These are not laws etched into the fundamental equations of physics, but they are laws of experience and perception. Time appears to move forward because body, sky and matter refuse to rest. Galaxies drift apart in silence, quantum events multiply in secret, and the mind bends toward the unseen. From these fragments, the illusion of time's direction is built, fragile yet unbroken. The forward slope remains, drawn across every life and every horizon. But the moment you accept the slope, imagination rebels. What if you could climb against it, stepping back into the past? The most famous answer is a paradox sharp enough to unravel logic itself: the grandfather paradox. The thought experiment is simple, almost childish in its cruelty. You travel into the past and encounter your grandfather before he ever met your grandmother. The world smells of coal smoke and horse dung, markets filled with cries of vendors, iron-shod wheels striking stone. You stand there watching him, younger than you ever knew him, full of energy and unaware of the role he will play in your very existence. If you prevent him from meeting her, by violence, by distraction, even by the smallest change, then your parent will never be born, and neither will you. And if you never exist, then who was it that travelled back? This riddle has haunted both philosophy and science fiction for more than a century. H.G. Wells, in The Time Machine, 1895, gave the world its first iconic traveller, but avoided the trap of rewriting his own bloodline. By the 1940s, pulp magazines turned the paradox into drama. Assassins sent back to kill dictators, heroes sent to save ancestors. In each case, the same contradiction rose like smoke. The past, once altered, erases the possibility of the alteration. Physicists began to take the question seriously in the 20th century. If time travel into the past were allowed by relativity's equations, and wormholes, at least in theory, make it possible, then paradoxes like this could arise. In the 1980s, researchers such as Kip Thorne explored whether the universe might protect itself from contradiction, enforcing consistency through hidden laws. The idea was unsettling. Perhaps you can travel back, but you will always fail to change what matters. Your grandfather will survive the encounter because the logic of reality demands it. The paradox grows more personal when you imagine not a stranger in history but your own life. You sit in your childhood home, the smell of wood smoke in the air, toys scattered on the floor. Across the room, the younger version of your parent plays, unaware of the role they'll have in your future. If you speak, if you interfere, if you shift even the smallest detail, what becomes of the line that leads to you? The mind circles the same impossibility, action that cancels itself. And yet the paradox is not merely fiction. In 1991, the philosopher David Lewis analysed it under the name of counterfactual dependence, pointing out that contradictions arise only if we assume that time is open to alteration. If instead the past is fixed, then your attempt to kill your grandfather will always fail. The gun will jam, the moment will slip, events will twist back to their original shape. What looks like freedom is already a prison. Still, the paradox lives on because it touches the most human of desires: to undo mistakes, to repair the past, to erase pain. History is full of regrets that breed the fantasy of reversal. From the medieval farmer wishing to stop the famine of 1315, to the survivor of war dreaming of preventing its first spark, to the modern scientist asking if a machine could rewrite loss, the longing is the same. The paradox reminds that such hope collapses under its own weight. In the end, the grandfather paradox is less about murder and more about identity. If time could be rewritten, who would you become? If the branch that leads to your existence could be cut, what remains? The paradox lingers not because it is unsolved, but because it forces the question, is the past fragile or is it unbreakable? The markets of 1890, the smoke of coal, the rattle of iron wheels, all remain untouched in imagination, because if they were broken, the imagination itself would vanish. The grandfather paradox stands like a gate at the edge of time, daring anyone to pass through, while silently ensuring that none can. Yet if the grandfather paradox questions the fragility of the past, another paradox questions the very idea of beginnings. It is called the bootstrap paradox, and it asks what happens when information or objects exist without origin, looping endlessly through time. Imagine a notebook lying on your desk. Its pages are filled with equations for a machine that does not yet exist. You open it, trace the lines with your finger, and begin to build. Years later, when the machine is real, you hand the notebook to your younger self. Where then did the equations come from? They were never written by a first hand. They appeared from the loop itself. Science fiction has delighted in this puzzle. A famous example comes from the 1941 short story By His Bootstraps by Robert A. Heinlein, which gave the paradox its name. Heinlein's characters live in a world where knowledge and events fold back on themselves, producing chains with no first link. In cinema, it has become the backbone of countless time travel plots. The song taught by no composer, the weapon built by no inventor, the phrase whispered by no original speaker. The paradox feels absurd because human life is rooted in origins. Bread comes from flour, flour from grain, grain from the field. You hold a crust of bread, smell its sour edge, chew its texture, and know the farmer once planted seed. The miller ground flour, the baker shaped dough. But in the bootstrap paradox, the bread is always already there. The seed has no sower, the field no season. The chain of cause is cut, yet the object remains. Physicists approach this not as fantasy but as logical consequence. In 1974, physicist Frank Tipler explored time loops within the mathematics of general relativity, showing that closed time-like curves could in theory create causal circles. In such a loop, information could circulate without beginning. The universe would not forbid it. The only thing that resists is the human mind, trained to demand sources, first causes, origins. Philosophers such as David Lewis in the 1980s defended the idea as logically consistent. If a book of equations is handed from future to past, there is no contradiction, only discomfort. The equations exist, but no author can be identified. For some, this is proof that reality itself may be stranger than story. Self-sustaining loops may be possible, even if unsettling. The paradox grows heavier when you place yourself inside it. You stand in a dim library, candle smoke curling in the air, holding a manuscript so old its ink has faded. The diagrams inside it are detailed, mechanical, precise. You copy them, build from them, and decades later find yourself handing the same manuscript to the same shelf. Was the ink ever wet? Did a hand ever draft the diagrams? The loop erases the answer. The discomfort is not only philosophical, it cuts at the root of meaning. Human culture depends on beginnings, the birth of a child, the founding of a city, the invention of fire. Myths are built on first moments. In the beginning is how stories start. The bootstrap paradox erases beginnings, leaving only circles. In that world, stories have no start, only repetition. It is this absence that unsettles. The paradox does not destroy logic, as the grandfather paradox threatens to do. Instead, it hollows logic, pulling away the anchor of origin. Objects remain, knowledge remains, but the first spark is gone. What is left is a mirror reflecting itself forever. But another paradox works differently. Instead of erasing beginnings, it erases choice. The predestination paradox insists that every attempt to change the past only fulfills it, that your struggle to resist is already part of the script. This paradox is older than physics. The Greeks told it through the tragedy of Oedipus. Warned by an oracle that he would kill his father and marry his mother, Oedipus fled from the family he thought was his own, only to stumble into the prophecy he sought to escape. In fleeing, he fulfilled it. The past and future were locked together, the path unalterable. Medieval chronicles carry the same thread. Astrologers drew charts for kings, predicting battles and deaths. In 1415, before the Battle of Agincourt, English troops believed the stars favoured their cause. French knights too believed fate had written their victory. One side triumphed, the other fell, yet both were convinced the outcome was inscribed before the first arrow flew. You stand on the edge of a battlefield, the smell of damp earth and sweat in the air, hearing the tension of bows drawn. No matter what choice you imagine, the battle seems already written in the mud. Modern physics reformulated this fatalism with clinical precision. In the 1980s, Igor Novikov proposed his self-consistency principle. If time travel into the past is possible, then paradoxes cannot occur. Events are constrained to fit a consistent timeline. Try to kill your ancestor and you will fail. Try to prevent a disaster, and your attempt becomes the reason it happens. Choice remains an illusion. The script cannot be broken. The paradox grows sharper when applied to ordinary life. You walk into a crowded medieval town square and hear a preacher warn of plague. He urges the crowd to flee, to save themselves. In the panic, doors slam, carts overturn, and disease spreads faster than before. The attempt to avert disaster becomes the cause of it. The prophecy fulfills itself, whether spoken by oracle, preacher, or scientist. This self-fulfilling pattern is everywhere. In the 16th century, Nostradamus published prophecies so vague that generations twisted them to fit wars, fires, and kings. In each retelling, the event and the prediction became inseparable. In psychology too, the phenomenon is familiar. Believe strongly enough that you will fail, and the belief bends your actions until you do. The predestination paradox unnerves because it denies freedom. It suggests that even rebellion is scripted, that every detour leads back to the same road. You feel it in your own life when a decision that seems spontaneous later feels inevitable, when the path behind you looks less like choices and more like a line that could never have bent elsewhere. In stories, it makes for tragedy. In science, it becomes an argument that the universe protects itself from contradiction. And in human experience, it mirrors the suspicion that destiny is not only written, but unchangeable, no matter how much you resist. The paradox does not scream like broken glass or vanish into loops without start. It sits quietly, whispering that everything you do, even your refusal, was always meant to happen. In 1990, the theorist Joseph Polchinski described a thought experiment. that made time paradoxes feel less like fantasy and more like mathematics. The idea used nothing grander than a billiard ball and a wormhole, yet its implications threaten to tear causality apart. The experiment is deceptively simple. A ball rolls toward the mouth of a wormhole, slips inside and emerges a few seconds earlier in the past. Once back, it collides with its younger self and knocks it away from the entrance. If it is knocked aside, it never enters. If it never enters, there is nothing to collide. Logic buckles under the loop. You lean over a billiard table, chalk dust in the air, the cue snapping against polished wood. The ball clacks forward, smooth and steady, a sound as sharp as bone. Now imagine one of those collisions turning not across the felt, but through the fabric of space itself, folding back into its own beginning. The familiar sound of impact becomes a contradiction written in physics. Physicists around Kip Thorne quickly realised the thought experiment was more than a trick. Relativity does allow for closed time-like curves, paths in space-time that bend back into themselves. Polchinski's scenario simply showed what happens when those curves are populated by real matter. The paradox could no longer be brushed aside as fiction. Equations demanded an answer. One suggestion came from the Novikov self-consistency principle, introduced in the 1980s. It stated that events on such a curve must adjust to remain consistent. The ball could emerge from the wormhole at just the right angle to nudge, not prevent, its younger self from entering. No contradictions would appear because the universe would forbid them. Freedom would be gone, but consistency preserved. You hear the echo of the ball striking over and over, each sound identical, as if the table itself has trapped the motion in an endless loop. The sensation is uncanny, a reminder that repetition does not free you but binds you to an order you cannot break. Polchinski's paradox differs from myth and prophecy because it is built from equations rather than imagination. The Greek spoke of fate. Polchinski spoke of mechanics. The outcome was the same, a vision of time where paths are locked and contradiction is an illusion of thought, not of the world. The image of the ball circling through wormholes remains, not as a toy puzzle, but as a boundary stone. It marks the line where physics admits that causality itself is fragile, a structure that might bend under the weight of its own logic. Among the boldest ideas of modern physics is one that removes the flow of time entirely. Past, present and future do not follow each other but exist together, simultaneously, like pages already printed. This vision is called the block universe. The shock lies in its simplicity. If relativity dissolves the idea of a universal now, then no single moment is privileged. Each instant, the year 1315 when famine gripped Europe, the year 1905 when Einstein reshaped physics, the moment you inhale now, all coexist in a four-dimensional structure. You sit in your room and feel the quiet around you, yet in this model your birth is still here, your death is already here. Every breath you will ever take lies within the same block of space-time. What feels like flow is only the mind's way of sliding across the surface. The foundation was laid in 1908 by Hermann Minkowski, who recast Einstein's relativity into geometry. Space and time, he argued, are not separate but united in a four-dimensional continuum. From now on, space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away, he declared. The idea of the block was born, a universe where all events are points, already placed, already existing. Philosophers called this eternalism. They contrasted it with presentism, the belief that only the present is real. Eternalism insists the past never vanished, the future is not empty, and now is only a perspective. You walk through a city street, Hear vendors cry out, smell roasted bread. In eternalism, that moment never dies. It is inscribed forever in the fabric of space-time. The market remains, the cries remain, the scent remains, even if no one can return. Einstein himself leaned toward this view. In a 1955 letter of condolence for the death of his friend Michel Besseau, he wrote that for physicists convinced of relativity, the distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. The words shocked those who expected comfort in flow. Instead, they offered the idea of a world where every moment is equally alive. The unsettling part is not mathematics but perception. You feel your heartbeat, the rise and fall of your breath, the ticking of a clock on the wall. These sensations convince you that now is special. Eternalism denies it. In the block, your heart beat 10 minutes ago and 10 years from now are as real as the one you feel this second. The uniqueness of now dissolves. This vision changes how life itself appears. To live in a block universe is to be stretched across time as you're stretched across space, extended, continuous, entire. The birth cry, the final silence, the moments of hunger, love and sleep are not erased by passing. They endure side by side, waiting like rooms already built. The corridor of time is not a river but a cathedral, where every chamber exists at once. This cathedral is the heart of eternalism, the philosophy that treats time as a dimension equal to space. In this view, the universe is a four-dimensional block, a structure in which every event, from birth to death, is fixed forever. The idea took shape in 1908 when Hermann Minkowski, once Einstein's teacher, declared that space and time were no longer separate. Instead, they formed space-time, a single fabric woven with 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. What we experience as a fleeting moment is, in the block model, simply one coordinate among others. You stand in a narrow alley and feel the walls close on each side, stones pressing against your shoulders. The width of the alley is one coordinate, the time of that moment is another. Neither vanishes when you move forward. Both remain part of the whole. Philosophers called this eternalism, setting it against presentism, the belief that only the present exists. For eternalists, all times exist equally. The cries of children in famine years, the signing of medieval treaties, the sound of trains in the 19th century, and the silence of tomorrow's dawn are all carved into the block. They are not waiting to happen, nor fading into memory. They are there, side by side. This vision changes how life itself is seen. To say the universe is a block is to say your life is an extension, not a flow. A child's first breath, an old man's last sigh, the hunger in 1315, the discovery of relativity in 1905, the fire you watched die last night. Each is a point in the same structure. You feel your body now, the rhythm of breath, the ache in your legs, the warmth of your hands, and eternalism insists that these sensations will never vanish. They exist, inscribed in space-time, even after your awareness has moved elsewhere. Einstein himself leaned into this idea. When his friend Michel Besseau died in 1955, Einstein wrote that for those who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present and future is a persistent illusion. The words capture eternalism's core. Nothing is lost, everything is preserved. To live in a block universe is to imagine your existence stretched across time like a sculpture, not a line. You walk through a medieval cathedral, hear your steps echo on the stone floor, smell the wax of centuries of candles. Each echo, each scent, each breath is a coordinate, fixed forever in the geometry of space-time. The building holds every prayer ever spoken there. The universe holds every instant ever lived. Eternalism unsettles because it denies change in the deepest sense. Events do not come into being or slip into nothingness. They simply are. The pain of famine, the joy of harvest, the death of kings, the silence of unborn centuries, all coexist in the block. What we call history is only our traversal of it, page by page. The block universe does not require belief to hold its shape. It exists in equations, in relativity, in the consistency of physics. Whether you accept it or not, the block contains your story, entire and unalterable, every coordinate present. If every event exists already, then the moment you call now loses its privilege. The present feels special, but eternalism insists it is just one point among countless others, no more real than yesterday or tomorrow. You sit at a table feeling the rough wood beneath your palms, hearing the clatter of dishes and the hiss of bread pulled from an oven. The moment feels alive, brighter than memory, sharper than imagination. Yet for the block universe, this moment is no different from the first time you learn to walk or the last time you will draw breath. All are equally real, all are equally preserved. Philosophers sensed this unease long before Einstein. Augustine of Hippo in the 4th century wrote that the present is a knife edge with no thickness, vanishing as soon as you try to grasp it. The past is memory, the future is expectation, and the present is barely there at all. Neuroscience echoes this. Your brain integrates signals from sight, sound, and touch with tiny delays, then presents them to you as a single instant. What you feel as now is a construction, a stitched illusion arriving after the fact. Experiments in the 20th century showed just how elastic the present can be. In 1955, psychologist Paul Fraisse argued that what we call the present is actually a span of several seconds, a window in which the brain gathers events into a single unit. Later, with modern imaging, neuroscientists discovered the specious present, the interval that feels like now, but is really a blend of past and immediate memory. You walk through a city square, bells tolling, carts rolling over cobblestones, voices rising in argument. The sounds do not strike separately. Your mind braids them into a moment, a present that has already ended by the time you sense it. Physics deepens the illusion. In relativity, simultaneity is relative. Two observers in different motions may disagree on whether events happen at the same time. One traveller sees lightning strike two trees at once. Another, moving swiftly, sees one flash before the other. If now depends on perspective, it cannot be universal. The present is local, not absolute. This undermines the comfort of experience. You feel the weight of now in your body, a breath drawn, a pulse in your wrist, the faint ache of your back after sitting too long. Yet eternalism tells you those sensations are coordinates like any other, frozen alongside every other moment of your life. The privilege of now dissolves, leaving only a continuum where nothing vanishes and nothing awaits. The illusion persists because it is necessary. To live without a sense of present would be to drift, unable to act, unable to choose. The brain grants you a stage called now so you can survive, even if the play is already written. Without the illusion, life would unravel into silence. The block universe leaves you with a paradox. The present feels undeniable, yet it is no more real than the memory of famine centuries ago or the silence of a death centuries ahead. What you call now is a shimmer, a trick of perspective on a structure already complete. When life is seen as part of a block, perception shifts. Instead of a story unfolding, existence appears as a sculpture already carved, every detail intact. To live inside this vision is to see yourself not as a traveller but as a figure stretched across time. You stand before a mirror and notice the lines on your face, the grey in your hair, the ache in your back as you bend. In the flow view of time, these changes mark progress, the march toward endings. In the block view, each age of you exists simultaneously, the child still reaching for bread, the adult still working under the weight of days, the elder still breathing in silence. None replace the others. They coexist like different rooms in the same house. This house-like metaphor of time appeared in the late 20th century in the writings of Julian Barber, who argued that reality may be nothing more than a vast collection of nows. He compared existence to a gallery, each moment a painting, each painting equally real. Philosopher Peter Linz pressed further, suggesting that instants of time do not exist at all, only relations between events. The block universe absorbed both views, turning life into a structure where nothing is lost. Religion has long offered its own echoes of this model. Medieval theology imagined an omniscient God for whom all of history is visible at once, every prayer, battle, and death equally present. Eternalism provides a secular version. The universe itself holds every event, without need of divine witness. You walk into a cathedral, hear your steps echo on stone worn by centuries, smell the wax of candles that melted long ago. The sound and the scent belong not only to the present, but to the architecture of time itself. The unsettling part is not only the denial of flow, but the removal of loss. If every moment exists forever, then grief changes its meaning. The dead are not erased, their moments are intact. The laughter of a friend, the cry of a newborn, the silence of a final breath, all remain in the block, untouchable but eternal. Physics whispers what myth once promised, that nothing truly disappears. This vision changes how choices feel. In a flowing time, decisions shape the future. In the block, the choices already exist, their outcomes already inscribed. You feel the weight of this when you hesitate, imagining different paths. Eternalism replies that all paths exist, each equally real, each equally permanent. What feels like freedom is only the act of glimpsing one corridor instead of another. The shift is profound. To see life as a block is to see tragedy and joy alike as permanent fixtures, neither fleeting nor gone. Hunger in 1315, discoveries in 1905, the scent of bread today. Each is a coordinate in space-time, neither erased nor postponed. Existence is not a journey, but a completed whole, a sculpture of every breath. The block universe is not comforting, nor cruel. It is indifferent, a structure that holds without judgment. What changes is the gaze. Once you see life as part of the block, you no longer think of moments as passing. They are not lost, they are already there. What feels like the river of time may be nothing more than a trick of the brain. The flow you trust so deeply might not belong to the universe at all, but to the fragile machinery of memory and perception. Philosophers sensed this centuries ago. Augustine in the 4th century confessed that he understood time until someone asked him to explain it. Then it slipped away like water. He wrote that the past is memory, the future is expectation, and the present scarcely exists at all. Modern psychology rephrased this in clinical terms. What you call the stream of time is stitched together by your mind. In the 1890s, the American philosopher and psychologist William James described consciousness as a stream, not of time itself, but of thought. He pointed out that the mind does not perceive isolated instants, but blends them into continuity. A bell does not strike once, it echoes. A hand does not move, it sweeps. The illusion of flow is built by the brain. You close your eyes and hear footsteps in a hallway. Each sound is distinct, separated by seconds, but your mind links them into rhythm. Without that linking, the sound would feel fractured, meaningless. Neuroscience has confirmed that the brain integrates signals with delays of fractions of a second, then presents them as a seamless moment. By the time you feel now, it has already passed. Experiments across the 20th century deepened this insight. In 1955, psychologist Paul Fraisse studied how the brain defines a present moment. He found that what we call now is not an instant, but a span of several seconds, a window in which perception blends events into unity. Later studies confirm this with music. Notes played close together are heard as melody, not fragments. The present is not a point, but a construction. Memory seals the illusion. You walk through a marketplace, voices clashing, the smell of roasted bread in the air, carts rattling across stone. Hours later, recalling it, the chaos becomes a single impression. The sound of trade, the warmth of bread. The mind edits, compresses, and replays. The memory of time becomes the story of time. Without memory, there is no past, only disconnected sensations. Neuroscience adds the final layer. Brain imaging shows that remembering the past and imagining the future activate the same regions. The brain reuses its machinery, shifting fragments of experience into projection. You feel the weight of this when you worry about tomorrow, your mind rehearsing possibilities as if they were memories already lived. In the absence of true flow, consciousness creates continuity by weaving what was with what might be. The unsettling truth is that the universe may not flow at all. It may simply exist, block-like and indifferent, while the brain generates the sensation of passing. What you call time is the brain's theatre. Memory as the backdrop, perception as the stage, anticipation as the script. The play unfolds within you, while outside the stage the universe remains silent. If time's river is only a theatre, then memory is its scenery. Psychology shows that what we call the past is not stored like a recording, but rebuilt each time it is recalled, fragile, flexible, and easily reshaped. In 1885, the German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus tested his own memory with nonsense syllables and charted the now famous forgetting curve. He discovered that memory decays rapidly, with most detail vanishing within hours. What remains is not a perfect archive, but fragments stitched into a story. You sit at a desk, candle flickering, reading a list of strange words over and over. Hours later, only a few survive in your mind, the rest dissolved into haze. By the 20th century, psychologists showed that recall is reconstruction. Memories are edited each time they return. A medieval chronicler describing famine in 1316 wrote of bark ground into flour and children dying in the fields. Centuries later, historians argue over exaggeration and metaphor. The memory of famine is not the famine itself, but a reconstruction shaped by fear, hunger, and later retelling. Experiments proved how malleable memory can be. In the 1970s, Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated that witnesses could be persuaded to remember events that never occurred, simply by suggestion. The past is not stable, but porous. You walk into a noisy tavern, smell ale spilled on the floor, hear laughter and shouts. Recall it years later, and your mind may invent details. A song that wasn't sung, a face that wasn't there. The story of time is altered without your consent. The psychology of perception reinforces this fragility. The present itself is not immediate but assembled. Signals from eye, ear and skin arrive at slightly different speeds. The brain delays them, then merges them into a seamless now. By the time you sense the clatter of hooves in a medieval street, or the glow of a torch in darkness, those moments are already past. The present is memory in disguise. Neuroscience of the 21st century sharpened this picture. Studies with brain imaging reveal that the same networks are active when people recall the past and imagine the future. Memory and imagination are twins, sharing architecture. You feel this when you rehearse tomorrow's tasks or picture a conversation yet to come. Your mind treats the future as a kind of memory written ahead of time. The illusion of flow arises from this overlap. Taken together, psychology insists that time is not stored or retrieved but constantly rebuilt. What you call the past is never solid. It is a painting repainted each time you look, a market reconstructed from fragments of sound and smell, a story reshaped by each retelling. The scenery of memory may be fragile, but it is enough to convince you of time's direction. Events feel ordered not because the universe flows, but because the mind insists on arranging them into narrative. The story is the arrow. If memory is the scenery, then sequence is the stagecraft. Neuroscience shows that the brain does not receive time as a river, but stitches signals together, one after another, to create the illusion of continuity. In 1953, surgeons removed parts of the hippocampus from a man known as HM to treat epilepsy. The procedure left him unable to form new long-term memories. He could hold a thought for seconds, then it vanished. For him, life became a series of fragments. Neuroscientists realized that without the hippocampus, there is no thread of sequence, only isolated moments. You imagine this existence: reaching for a cup, drinking, setting it down, and then losing the act instantly, as though nothing had occurred. The concept of the specious present, first outlined in philosophy and studied by psychologists like William James, became a focus of neuroscience in the late 20th century. Researchers found that the brain integrates signals over a short span, about 3 seconds, to build what feels like the present. A bird call, the slam of a door, the rustle of clothing are woven into one moment. You hear the sound of hooves striking cobblestones, smell smoke from a torch, feel the weight of your own body leaning forward. Each signal arrives at a different time, but the brain delays and merges them into a single slice of now. In the 1990s and 2000s, brain imaging revealed the machinery behind this illusion. Regions of the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus light up both when recalling a sequence of events and when imagining one. The same systems that bind memories also project them forward, creating continuity. Without this binding, life would be unlivable, nothing but sparks with no order. Modern experiments add new layers. Using fMRI, scientists found that when people watch a film, their brains anticipate the next scene by milliseconds, smoothing the flow. The same networks fire when you listen to music. Notes are predicted, gaps are filled, rhythm is completed before it exists. You tap your foot to the beat, convinced of the flow, when in fact your brain is constructing it in advance. This orchestration is fragile. Damage to certain brain regions can fracture sequence. Patients with temporal lobe injuries sometimes experience time as disjointed, events failing to connect. For them, the illusion of continuity breaks, leaving life in fragments. Neuroscience shows that what feels like an unstoppable arrow is really careful editing, a story spliced together in real time. The lesson is profound. Sequence is not discovered but created. The body insists on continuity, and the brain obliges. Perception becomes narrative, and narrative becomes time. The universe may remain silent, indifferent to past or future, yet inside the brain, neurons fire in patterns that force the silence into rhythm. Sequence is the mind's invention, a fragile machine running on sparks and memory, but without it there would be no time at all. Consciousness gives rhythm to the silent universe. Without awareness there is no past, no future, no present, only events without order. Time begins when the mind observes. In the 1890s, William James described consciousness as a stream, not of time itself, but of experience. Moments blend into flow because the mind insists they do. Neuroscience later confirmed that the brain does not merely record but actively binds signals together, and consciousness becomes the narrator of this sequence. You wake in darkness, hearing the faint whistle of wind through shutters. Muscles ache, the air is cold, your breath is heavy. Only when consciousness gathers these sensations into "I am here now" does time appear. The spotlight of awareness turns fragments into a moment. Julian Barber argued in the 20th century that reality consists of timeless nows, static arrangements of the universe. Flow, he suggested, is the mind moving across them. Peter Linz pressed even further. Instants may not exist at all, only relationships between events. Neuroscience supports this with evidence that consciousness stitches those relationships into continuity. Without awareness, there is no before or after. Sleep reveals this clearly. You dream of walking a road, of hearing voices, of touching walls that crumble as you move. Hours later you wake, and the dream collapses into fragments. The clock insists time has passed, yet your experience tells you it was discontinuous. Awareness gave the dream sequence. Without it, sleep is timeless. In modern hospitals, anesthesia makes this truth stark. The body continues to function. Neurons still fire. Yet when awareness is gone, time disappears. For the patient, hours collapse into nothing. When consciousness returns, time returns. You taste bread dipped in oil, warmth, salt, bitterness. Nerves carry each signal separately. Only awareness braids them into one moment, into the sense of a meal. That act of braiding is what you feel as time. This vision overturns the usual order. We imagine time as the container in which events unfold, with consciousness inside it. Science suggests the opposite. Consciousness builds the container, forcing events into line. The arrow of time may exist only because awareness demands a narrative. Consciousness is not a passenger drifting down the river of time. It is the current itself, the force that makes stillness appear as flow. Physics delivers a harsher truth. Time is not steady. Under the theory of relativity, it bends, stretches, and slows depending on speed and gravity. The seconds you trust are not universal but personal. The idea arrived in 1905 with Einstein's special theory of relativity. He proposed that the speed of light is constant for all observers, no matter how they move. To preserve this constancy, time itself must adjust. A clock on a fast-moving train ticks more slowly than one on the platform. You sit in a carriage, feel the rattle of wheels, watch the scenery blur. Inside, your watch ticks normally. Outside, an observer sees it crawl. The rhythm of seconds depends on motion. This was no metaphor. In 1915, Einstein's general theory of relativity added gravity to the distortion. Time runs slower in strong gravitational fields. Clocks on Earth's surface tick differently from those in orbit. In 1971, physicists Haffel and Keating flew atomic clocks around the world on commercial airliners. When compared with clocks on the ground, the flying clock showed measurable differences. The flow of time itself had shifted with motion and altitude. The shock is visceral. You walk up a mountain path, lungs burning, legs heavy. At the summit, a clock ticks slightly faster than the one you left behind in the valley. The difference is invisible to your body, but undeniable to physics. Each heartbeat, each breath, is entangled with gravity. Relativity makes time local, not global. Two twins can live different durations depending on how they move. One travels near light speed, the other stays home. When they reunite, their ages do not match. The story violates common sense but obeys the equations. For daily life, the differences are small, but technology depends on them. GPS satellites orbiting above Earth must correct for both special and general relativity. Without adjustment, navigation would drift kilometers each day. Every time you check a map, you rely on clocks that tick differently from those on the ground. Relativity guides your footsteps through invisible distortions of time. You feel the weight of this when you board a plane, engines roaring, body pressed into the seat. The seconds of your flight are not the same as those of the person waiting for you on the ground. The universe keeps two ledgers, both valid, both true. The relativity of time turns the world into a mosaic of private rhythms. No universal clock ticks above it all. The seconds you hold dear are not shared, they are local. To grasp this is to admit that time is elastic, stitched into the fabric of motion and mass. One of the clearest ways to feel this elasticity is through the story of two twins. Einstein's thought experiment showed that one can live fewer years than the other, not by magic but by motion. The paradox of the twins became the most famous illustration of relativity's strange grip on time. Imagine two brothers. One stays on Earth, living in the rhythm of days and seasons. The other departs in a spacecraft accelerating close to the speed of light. Years pass. When the traveller returns, less time has passed for him than for the one who stayed. Both are right, both have aged, but one is younger. You sit in the imagined cockpit, vibration rattling the frame, the hum of engines pressing against your chest. Your watch ticks evenly, pulse steady, body normal. Back on Earth, another watch ticks faster. You feel unchanged, yet physics insists that you are stretched. This is not fiction. Einstein first hinted at the paradox in 1911, and by 1918 the scenario was clearly formulated. For decades it remained a thought experiment. In 1971, the Hafele-Keating experiment put atomic clocks on commercial jets circling the Earth. When compared with synchronized clocks on the ground, the airborne clocks are drifted by measurable nanoseconds, exactly as relativity predicted. The paradox of the twins had stepped from theory into reality. Later, relativity's corrections became crucial for satellites. The global positioning system, developed in the late 20th century, relies on clocks moving high above Earth. Without adjusting for relativistic effects, GPS would misplace positions by kilometers each day. Every time someone navigates by phone, they rely on the twin paradox being true. You wait at an airport, hearing the echo of announcements, watching planes lift into the sky. Each flight changes time slightly for its passengers. The differences are microscopic, invisible to the body but real to the equations. Life becomes a fabric of different durations, each tied to speed and position. For astronauts, the paradox is sharper. Russian cosmonaut Sergei Avdeyev, after 748 days in orbit across the 1990s, had aged about 1/50th of a second less than people on Earth. A fraction, yet undeniable. Space turns every traveller into the younger twin. You imagine reunion after decades apart. One twin carries wrinkles, hair gone white, skin marked by time. the other returned smoother, younger, body preserved by motion. Both lived honestly. Both lived truly. The difference is only that the universe wrote their time at different rates. The paradox does not break logic, it deepens it. Relativity does not forbid aging, it makes aging local. Each path through space-time has its own duration, measured not against a single master clock but within itself. The lesson is unsettling. Time is not a single thread but many, woven by motion and mass. To compare them is to discover that simultaneity is gone, and with it the certainty of a shared lifespan. Quantum physics makes the problem stranger still. At the smallest scales, time does not behave like a steady background, but becomes uncertain, entangled, and sometimes absent altogether. In 1927, at the Solvay conference in Brussels, Einstein and Niels Bohr clashed over the foundations of quantum mechanics. Their debates were not only about particles and probability, but also about time itself. Does a particle have a defined past and future before measurement, or is time only meaningful when observation occurs? The clash left no simple answer, only the suspicion that time in quantum theory is not what it seems. You hold a clock in your hand, feel its weight, hear the ticking. Now imagine shrinking it to the scale of atoms. The ticks blur, then vanish. Quantum clocks built from oscillations of particles reveal that measurement itself alters the flow. In 2020, experiments showed that two quantum clocks placed side by side could fall out of sync simply because their particles interacted. Time at this level becomes relational, not absolute. The problem deepens in attempts to merge quantum mechanics with relativity. In the 1960s, physicists John Wheeler and Bryce DeWitt proposed an equation meant to unify quantum theory and gravity. The result was startling. Their equation had no time variable at all. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation describes a universe frozen, timeless. The flow of time does not exist in its mathematics. You stare at the symbols, chalk dust thick in the air, and realize the equations refuse to tick. Time, so obvious to the body, is absent from the theory. Other approaches have tried to restore time by redefining it. In loop quantum gravity, time is not a background stage but emerges from change, from relationships between events. In quantum information theory, time is treated as a sequence of correlations, not as an independent thing. The arrow you feel is a reflection of entanglement. You listen to silence in a room, waiting for sound. The pause feels long, though no clock measures it. In quantum mechanics, that pause could be the whole story. Events only exist in relation to others, and without relation there is no before or after. The quantum vision unsettles because it strips away the comfort of universality. Time is not guaranteed. It may dissolve into probability, appear only with measurement, or vanish entirely in the deepest equations. The seconds you count with breath and pulse are not fundamental. They are emergent, fragile, contingent. Physicists have spent decades trying to repair this fracture. To unite relativity and quantum mechanics, they search for a theory of quantum gravity, and in that search, the question of time refuses to stay silent. In the 1960s, the Wheeler-DeWitt equation shocked researchers by erasing time altogether. The mathematics described a static universe, frozen, eternal. Many resisted, hoping later theories would restore flow. Yet every attempt to reconcile the small and the vast forced the same question. Is time fundamental, or does it emerge from something deeper? String theory, developed in the 1970s and 80s, tried to unify particles and gravity by describing everything as vibrations of tiny strings. In this framework, time is part of a 10 or 11-dimensional geometry. But even here, some physicists suspect time is not basic. It may arise from more primitive structures of space and energy. You imagine standing in a hall filled with resonant tones, each vibration shaping the air. The sound feels continuous, yet it is built from discrete notes. Time in string theory may be no different. Loop quantum gravity, developed in the 1990s, approached the problem from the other side. It proposed that space itself is quantized, built from indivisible loops. In such a universe, time is not a flowing dimension but the ordering of changes between loops. You sit quietly, watching the slow rhythm of a candle flame flicker. Each change, each tremor of light, becomes a unit. Flow is nothing more than the sequence of changes. In the 21st century, some theorists have gone further, arguing that time is not a physical thing at all but a property of correlations. In quantum information theory, time emerges from the comparison of states. One system changes relative to another. Without comparison, there is no before or after. You wait in a silent room, breath steady, and only when the clock hand shifts do you feel a moment has passed. Time appears in relation, not in isolation. These attempts share a theme. Time resists definition, yet without it physics cannot move. Some see this as a sign that our understanding is incomplete, that a deeper theory will one day reveal what time truly is. Others suggest the silence is final. There is no universal time, only structures that generate the illusion. The search continues, not with certainty, but with questions carved into equations and experiments. Each approach holds fragments, but none yet reveal the whole. In the vision of quantum gravity, time is not a river but a shadow, emerging, fading, never fundamental, always dependent. One radical proposal takes this further. Perhaps there is no time at all. Physicist Julian Barber argued that reality is a vast collection of nows, each a complete arrangement of the universe, timeless and eternal. Barber introduced this vision in the late 20th century. Instead of seeing existence as a flowing line, he described it as a gallery of static moments. Each now is like a painting, finished, whole, self-contained. Together they form what he called Platonia, a timeless landscape where nothing passes. You walk through an imagined gallery, candles burning low, dust heavy in the air. On the walls hang scenes of your life, childhood laughter, a moment of fear, a future not yet lived but already framed. Each scene is equally present, none erased, none awaiting. To move through the gallery is not to create events but to notice them. This vision resonates with the block universe but differs in tone. In Relativity, space-time is a four-dimensional fabric. Events spread across it like points. In Barber's timeless cosmos, even the fabric dissolves. Only the nows remain, arranged without before or after. Barber drew on physics but also on philosophy. Augustine had once admitted that time slips away the moment you try to grasp it. William James had described consciousness as a stream, yet Barber reversed the image. There is no stream, only still water frozen into forms. Neuroscience adds echoes, memories and imaginings built from the same machinery, making past and future indistinguishable from perspective. You sit in a quiet room, hand resting on a table, listening to the faint creak of wood. This moment feels alive, but Barber would insist it is only one, now among countless others, all equally real. The moment of your first breath exists as much as this silence, as much as your final exhale. The unsettling part of Barber's gallery is the loss of becoming. Change, in his model, is only the arrangement of nows in relation. There is no passage, no flow, only comparison. You feel this when looking at old photographs. The smile captured decades ago still exists, unchanged, while the body that smiled has withered. The photo is a relic, but in Barber's cosmos the moment itself is eternal, not gone. The idea denies the comfort of movement. It offers instead the permanence of everything. To accept it is to see life not as fragile seconds slipping away, but as a completed collection of scenes, unalterable and whole. A different voice challenged even the idea of moments. Physicist Peter Linz argued that instants of time do not exist at all. What we call the present is never a point but only relations between events. Linz, writing in the early 2000s, suggested that reality is continuous but never frozen. To ask what happens at a single instant is meaningless, because instants do not exist. Motion is not made of still frames but of relationships. A runner's leg is never in one place, it is always in the process of moving. The arrow of time is an illusion born from asking the wrong question. You take a step on a stone path. Your foot hovers, touches, presses, lifts. At no point can you say the foot is frozen in an instant. Each description depends on what came before and what comes after. The step is not an instant, but a relation between positions. This echoes ancient paradoxes. Zeno of Elea in the 5th century BCE asked how an arrow in flight could move if at every instant it is motionless. Linz gave the modern reply, there are no instants. Motion does not consist of infinite freezes but of uninterrupted change. Philosophers of the 20th century leaned towards similar ideas. Henri Bergson argued that time as lived is duration, not a sequence of instants. In physics, the mathematics of calculus describes change through limits, not snapshots. Linz pushed this to its extreme. To measure an instant is to kill motion. You breathe in the dark, chest rising and falling. The act cannot be pinned to a single point. Each inhale is a bridge between what came before and what follows. The present is not the peak of the breath, but the relation between movements. The unsettling part of Linz's argument is that it erases the very thing we trust most, now. If there are no instants, then the present never exists in isolation. It is always transition, never a fixed point. You feel this when watching a shadow move along a wall. You cannot say when exactly it is. You can only say it was there, now, here, always changing. For Linz, this destroys the paradox of continuity. The world is not a chain of instants glued together. It is a fabric without seams. Time, in this view, is not composed of moments but of relations, not things but processes. Such a picture is alien to ordinary life, yet in science it aligns with the mathematics of motion, and in philosophy it strips away illusions. If there are no instants, then the flow of time is a mistake of thought, a question asked in the wrong language. The absence of moments does not empty the world. It fills it with continuity, with change that never stops to rest. Some physicists have gone further, treating time not as an illusion or a relation but as a physical object, something with size, shape, and structure. In this vision, time is as real as stone, a thing that can stretch, bend, or even be measured directly. Ideas like this grew in the late 20th and early 21st century, as cosmologists ask whether time itself might have a geometry. Space is known to curve around stars and galaxies. Could time too have a dimension that is not abstract but physical? Researchers such as Paul W. Anderson suggested that time might possess measurable size like length or volume. You stand in a long corridor, torches burning against stone walls. The distance you see is spatial, but imagine that same distance describing duration. A hallway of hours, a chamber of minutes. The physical world may contain time as a dimension that can be walked, not only sensed. Quantum clocks provide experimental hints. In the 2010s, physicists measured how time dilates at differences of just centimeters in height. Two clocks placed on different shelves of the same room tick at different rates, shifted by Earth's gravity. This is relativity made tangible, but it also raises the question, if time can be stretched and compared like this, does it not behave like an object with size? Cosmology pushes the metaphor further. In theories of the expanding universe, time is woven into the very growth of space. The Big Bang did not only create matter, it created time. You watch the night sky, the stars dimmed by distance, the faint smear of the Milky Way above. The vastness is not only space but duration itself, stretching outward like fabric. Time here is not invisible. It is the loom on which galaxies are hung. Some physicists explore whether time has a kind of volume. In quantum gravity, space-time may be granular, built from fundamental units. If so, time could have smallest indivisible steps, like atoms of duration. You feel the ticking of your pulse, not as a smooth line, but as beats, each a fragment of continuity. Could reality itself tick in such fragments? The vision of time as an object reshapes old questions. Instead of asking whether time flows, we ask what its texture is. Instead of debating illusion, we debate materiality. Time becomes not only the measure of events, but part of the furniture of the universe, subject to weight, tension, and distortion. No consensus exists. Some see these ideas as metaphors stretched too far. Others believe they point toward a new physics where time will no longer be stage or script but actor itself. The image that remains is heavy yet quiet. Time not as a shadow, but as a structure, a thing you might walk across, lean against, or measure with tools not yet built. Not everyone accepts that time is an illusion or a shadow. Many philosophers and physicists insist that time is real, irreducible and essential, the foundation without which change, causality and life itself collapse. The critique begins with lived experience. Hunger gnaws, seasons shift, pain endures and joy fades. These are not tricks of perception, defenders argue, but evidence that time itself is woven into reality. You walk across a frost-hardened field at dawn, breath visible in the cold. Each step feels irreversible. The ache in your muscles, the sound of boots on frozen ground, the slow rising of the sun, all insist on a direction, not an illusion. Philosophers in the 20th century challenged eternalism with fierce resistance. A.N. Pryor developed tense logic to defend the uniqueness of the present, insisting that statements about what is differ fundamentally from what was or will be. Paul Ricoeur explored narrative as a structure that unites past, present and future, arguing that stories themselves prove the reality of temporal order. Martin Heidegger, in Being and Time, 1927, declared that human existence is inseparable from temporality. To be is to be in time. Modern voices echo this defense. Philosopher Tim Maudlin insists that time must be taken as primitive and real, not derived from other phenomena. For Maudlin and others, attempts to erase time confuse the map with the territory. Physics may describe relations, but experience confirms time's independent weight. You sit at a table breaking bread still warm from the oven. Steam curls upward, crust crumbles, taste fades on the tongue. The bread that existed minutes ago no longer exists in the same way. To deny this, critics argue, is to deny the basic structure of reality. The present changes because time is real. Physicists, too, have resisted timeless visions. Lee Smolin, in Time Reborn, 2013, argued that time is not an illusion, but the most real aspect of the universe. For him, the laws of physics may themselves evolve, shaped by time. Change cannot be reduced to geometry or probability. It is primary, not emergent. You feel this when waiting in silence for news, each second heavy, each breath longer than the last. The duration is not mere perception. It is a fact of existence, pressing on body and mind alike. The defense of time's reality does not erase relativity or quantum puzzles. It insists instead that beneath equations lies something irreducible. Time is not just a measure, not just a relation, not just an illusion of the brain. It is the pulse of reality itself. The argument closes not with paradox but with insistence. Time is real because change is real, because becoming is real, because life without time would be impossible. Whatever else physics discovers, the defenders believe, time will remain the foundation on which everything stands. Still, a darker possibility lingers. What if time itself has an end? Cosmologists have drawn scenarios in which the universe runs down, tears apart, or freezes into silence. In these visions, time does not stretch forever, it collapses. The first model was born from the 19th century study of entropy. As Clausius and Boltzmann described the second law of thermodynamics, they realized its implication. The universe tends toward equilibrium. Stars will burn out, galaxies fade, and energy spreads so thin that nothing more can happen. This heat death became the earliest vision of the end of time. Life, memory, and history would stop not because of sudden violence, but because nothing new could occur. You feel a small echo of this when sitting in a room where every sound has faded. No footsteps, no wind, no voices. Only silence so deep it feels eternal. That silence, projected across the cosmos, is the heat death. Change erased, time emptied. In the late 20th century, new data reshaped the nightmare. In 1998, astronomers discovered that the universe is not only expanding but accelerating, driven by mysterious dark energy. If this expansion continues, galaxies will drift farther apart until even their light cannot reach each other. Trillions of years from now, the sky will be empty. The Big Freeze describes this future. Stars die, black holes evaporate, and the universe becomes cold darkness. Another vision is more violent, the Big Rip. If dark energy grows stronger, it could tear apart galaxies, then stars, then planets, and finally atoms themselves. You imagine walking through a city as its stones fracture, buildings dissolve, and even the molecules of air fall away. In the Big Rip, time ends not with silence, but with shattering, every structure destroyed by expansion itself. Some physicists have asked what it would mean for time itself to stop. In the block universe, every moment already exists, so the end would simply be another page in the structure. But in other models, time might cease to have meaning altogether. Equations predict states where entropy reaches maximum, change halts, and the arrow vanishes. A world without time would not be dark or silent. It would be nothing, not absence, but the collapse of the very idea of sequence. You stand under a night sky and watch stars burn. The light feels eternal, but cosmology insists it is temporary. Every star you see will die. Every galaxy will dim. The sky above you is a preview of absence. To think of this as the end of time is to imagine existence without flow, a frozen tableau with no before or after. The final question is more unsettling still. If time can end, did it ever begin? Perhaps what you call time is only an emergent order, appearing in a young universe and destined to fade in an old one. Perhaps time is not eternal but a phase, like ice melting to water, like breath leaving the lungs. If so, then time never truly began, and its end will be only a return to the silence beneath it.